Hi, I'm Dr. Tom McGovern, a dermatologist in Fort Wayne, Indiana. When I'm dressed in scrubs like this, I'm usually cutting the cancers off of the faces of patients, checking it under the microscope, cutting out more until the cancer is gone, and when it is gone, suturing the patient's faces back together again. But today I'm here because I chair the Young Member Advisory Committee of the Catholic Medical Association. We reach out and integrate young physicians in practice, resident and fellow physicians in training, medical students, and college students like you who are preparing for lives as medical professionals. What should you do today to become the healthcare professional you want to become tomorrow? That's the question we're going to answer in our breakout session entitled Catholic Healthcare, A Vocation to Love. You will meet 5 panelists who will help you learn through their stories how you can live your life differently today to prepare for your personal vocation in healthcare tomorrow. Vocation refers to being called by God, and everybody at birth is called to a vocation of holiness to be completed only in heaven. But with vocation, we also think about a state in life, such as priesthood, religious life, or marriage. But there is another sense of vocation, a personal vocation. It's been said that the 2 most important days of our lives are the day that we're born and the day that we find out why, which relates to personal vocation. So, young women, why are you studying to be a doctor, nurse, or therapist? Young men, why are you doing the same thing? It's because you believe it's your personal vocation. And as St. John Paul II said, our personal vocation is the singular, unique, and unrepeatable grace by which each Christian in the community of the people of God builds up the body of Christ. In other words, our personal vocation is for others. If John Paul II had a personalized license plate, it would have said GS24 for paragraph 24 of Gaudium et Spes from Vatican II, where it says, "Man can truly discover himself only in a sincere gift of himself." You are studying because you believe this is the specific way God wants you to be a gift to others. But what is the specific nature of the personal vocation to be a doctor, nurse, or therapist? It is to care with compassion for those who are suffering in body or in mind. And from the patient perspective, they define compassion from their caregivers as a virtuous response that leads and seeks to address the suffering and needs of a person through relational understanding and action. Virtue addressing suffering and needs relationally. And compassion, to those who study it, has 4 steps. And here I have 4 steps with 4 pumpkins. Convenient, since the pumpkin is the universal symbol of compassion. Actually, that's not true. The heart is, but I thought it would be really creepy to have 4 steps with hearts on them, so bear with me. The first step of compassion, illustrated by the Good Samaritan, was that he noticed, he observed, he saw the suffering. So step 1, use your mind to notice. But then allow your emotions, second, to be moved. We have an automatic empathic response when we notice what somebody else is going through, and we feel those same emotions. Just like in this 2013 NCAA basketball tournament game when Louisville was playing Duke, a Louisville player, Kevin Ware, had a horrific injury, and his 3 teammates are shown here having incredible empathic emotions because they have just seen this. How would you feel? But while they are stuck in a state known as empathic distress, and this empathic distress can lead in different directions. It can lead people to want to withdraw from the person who's suffering, or to act hostile against them, or to become, on the contrary, too involved. Anything so that this horrible, strong emotion, which they have caught, can be gotten rid of. And it's a challenge to separate this self from other. Am I feeling my own emotions or the others? And this is necessary if you are to be compassionate, to separate self from other. So when you are moved, you must be able to go to the next step of compassion, and that is to desire the relief of the one who is suffering. You'll notice I only showed you 4 of the 5 players on the floor because the 5th player knew what to do. He went over after deciding to relieve his suffering, and then he forth gave practical help and comforted him. He got past the empathic distress, completed the 4 steps of compassion, and actually brought relief to his suffering teammate. Because the final step is take the initiative and act now. You will notice that to give true compassion to patients or to anybody else, you have to go through all 4 steps. Your mind has to notice. Your emotions have to feel with the patient. Your will has to decide to desire their relief. And finally, your body has to act and be the gift to others. So it's not a question of whether you're going to be compassionate or competent in medicine. I mean, that's a guy thing, right? It's like, I'm competent. I don't do the compassion thing. Well, that's like thinking and asking the question, which foot do you walk with, your left foot or your right foot? You walk with them both. So if you're going to be a good healthcare professional, you have to be compassionate and competent. It's not an either or thing. And yet in our studies, we're going for the competent. How much are we growing in the compassionate? No, it's a both and game of life. And in fact, compassionate means competent. And you're not competent as a medical professional unless you are also compassionate. Yet today, there are so many roadblocks to even being this kind of person. And I experienced them in medical school, first year, behavioral sciences class. I had to give a presentation to my classmates on a life-changing event. The life-changing event I chose was a woman who found out unexpectedly she was pregnant, and then how this would impact her and her baby. I visited in Rochester, Minnesota, where I went to medical school, different adoption services, even Planned Parenthood, talked to different physicians in the Mayo Clinic, and then gave my presentation to my class. And after what my professor said was an excellent presentation, a classmate came down to me who was Christian and said, Tom, you realize now that the rest of the classmates hate you. It's like, what? Why do they hate me? Oh, because you said that abortion ends the life of a baby. To which I responded mentally, well, duh. I was naive. 3rd year of medical school, that naivety continued. I left the cozy confines of Mayo Clinic, boarded an airplane to go to my OBGYN rotation. And on the airplane, like most medical students, you may insert the sarcasm emoji now, I read Humane Vitae and for dessert feasted on the recently released Donum Vitae. And then I landed in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I did an OBGYN rotation at Tripler Army Medical Center. For 6 weeks, I spent delivering babies and learning what else you do in gynecologic care. One day, in the men's locker room, the chief resident and I were the only 2 there. His name, Dr. Peter Kropp. You may have heard his name because he is the abortionist that Abby Johnson ended up working for when she had her conversion. Dr. Kropp came into the locker room and said, McGovern, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure you never practice primary care medicine in the military, which was my goal at the time. I don't want you foisting your crazy beliefs on others. And then later in that rotation, I had to give a slide presentation to my fellow medical school classmates. I decided to do the topic of the scientific basis of natural family planning, and everything I presented was based on articles published in OBGYN medical literature. Nevertheless, halfway through the presentation, the professor, who was an obstetrician gynecologist, abruptly stopped me. He said, I can't tolerate this anymore. And I never once mentioned anything about morality. And when he stopped it, he said, well, the reason I can stop this is because I'm a Catholic Eucharistic minister. To which I thought, I bet he doesn't know what the term non sequitur means. In other words, what does that have to do with anything? Nevertheless, in internship, I continued. And in that internship, I did 13 4-week rotations in different disciplines. My first 2 rotations, first 8 weeks, were supposed to be spent in obstetrics and gynecology. After notifying the director of that rotation that I could not assist with sterilizations or provide contraceptives, he said, no, you're not allowed here. His words were, you are useless to us. Instead, I was given an extra month of general surgery, the most grueling rotation in the hospital. What did this do for my peers? Well, we were supposed to take every fourth night call in-house in the hospital because there were 4 of us interns and residents. Well, without me on the team, you do the math. There were 3 of us taking every third night call in the hospital. Needless to say, I was the outcast among our intern group for doing this. So how did I prepare myself so that I could endure this kind of treatment, which is probably waiting for many of you? Silent prayer. Every day I started in medical school with some form of silent prayer, no matter how brief. I started second year of medical school praying the rosary, often while driving, sometimes while walking. I would read at least something from the Bible every day and reflect on it briefly. And then to form my mind, I read my favorite living author, Dr. Peter Kraft, and I love it because he says, I write the books that I want to read that no one else has yet written. And then my favorite dead author, G.K. Chesterton. They'll both teach you how to think. And because I needed relationships with people who would help me be this kind of medical professional, in my parish of Pax Christi Catholic Church in Rochester, Minnesota, I and some friends started a young adult singles ministry. This was to enable me to be what John Cardinal Henry Newman said, to live a life with some definite service God has created for me. And he's created for you. He's committed some work to you, which he has not committed to another. You have your mission, and I had mine, and I needed those people in that young adult singles ministry. And Jesus is now saying to each of you, I want you to be, wait for it, a saint. And when does he want you to be a saint? Right now, because there's no better time to be a Catholic, a fully Catholic doctor, nurse, or therapist. The world needs you because there's a culture of death out there. And we're battling it because people don't want physicians, nurses, and therapists like us, the people in power, the people in the intelligentsia. But there is one group that overwhelmingly wants us to be that kind of person. And those are our patients. They want us. They need us. They desire a culture of life. And the culture of life is not necessarily an us versus them battle. As Solzhenitsyn said, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties, but right through every human heart. And even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. Wow. In other words, tend to your own heart first so that you can then help heal the hearts of others. So what does that mean you can do now? There's some great guidance in paragraph 42 of Lumen Gentium from Vatican II. Some of those helps that have assisted me: frequent the Eucharist. Try to attend at least one daily Mass a week if you can, and attend adoration at least once a month if you can. Confession and prayer, daily prayer, especially to start your day, especially prayer in silence. Not just exterior silence. We need interior silence. Otherwise, there's that constant chatter going on inside. We have to learn how to be silent and present in the moment. And then establish relationships. That's what life and eternity is all about, relationships. Getting to heaven is not about what you know. It's about who you know, Jesus Christ. And you need relationships with people who can help you be more like Jesus Christ. I didn't have the Catholic Medical Association in medical school, but you do. And what's our mission? Our mission is forming and supporting current and future physicians to live and promote the principles of the Catholic faith in both the science and the practice of medicine. It kind of rolls off your tongue. So who are you becoming? Are you becoming a healthcare professional who lives and promotes the Catholic faith in the science and practice of medicine? Well, that requires virtue. Virtue isn't scored on your tests, but along with knowledge, it's essential to be compassionate. So don't wait until you get an A in organic chemistry or get a great score on the U.S. medical license exam, step 1, 2, or 3. No, right now you should do what? I bet many of you have already predicted what I'm going to say. You should do what the Japanese archery team does. Yeah, you should, right? What do they focus on? They don't focus on where the arrow goes. They focus on what they're doing. They're focusing on the process. They might get a bullseye, but if they didn't pull back just right and do everything the correct way, they're not happy. Focus on process over outcome. And you've heard this before. God has not called me to be successful. He's called me to be faithful. Faithful is the process. Successful is the outcome. And it's an infinite goal. We never reach it. It's something we can wake up and do every day. That's what the 112 guilds of the Catholic Medical Association and the dozens of students groups do. They help us to become a certain kind of person, a holy and compassionate doctor, nurse, or therapist. When? Right now. Because what kind of person are you becoming now? Are you becoming a doctor, nurse, or therapist who happens to be Catholic? Or are you a Catholic who happens to be a doctor, nurse, or therapist? As a human person, you are made in the image and likeness of God. You possess a mind to know the truth and a will to love and do the good. So you need to form both. Form your minds. One suggestion of many: listen to Dr. Doctor, the official CMA podcast and radio show, because you will form your mind to think about everything medically through a Catholic lens. And isn't that the lens of reality? And secondly, form your wills. Many ways you can do this. One way is through the relationship with a mentor, somebody who is living the life you hope to live, somebody who can help you along the way. How can you find a mentor? One way: join the Catholic Medical Association. $25 a year. We have a new mentoring app where you can sign on, put up your profile, and then search for a physician, medical student, resident who you want to interact with, who you want to be your mentor. So in summary, first, the personal vocation to be a doctor, nurse, or therapist is to be compassionate in action for those suffering in mind or body. Secondly, to offer true compassion, you must form both your mind and your will. Now, your mind to know the truth, your will to love and do the good. And finally, focus on the process over the outcome now. Focus on your habits more than your grades and test scores. It's a challenge, but you can do it. And now it's story time. How Catholics have embraced a process of formation as college and medical students to fulfill their personal vocations to compassionately care for the sick. Before we hear from them, please open the online Catholic Medical Association booth in Mission Way. There you will find opportunities to interact with us, including the Zoom link to the live Q&A that we will hold with our panelists immediately after they share their inspiring stories. You will also find a Google form where you can submit your questions for our panelists, who include 2 physicians in practice, 2 physicians in training, and a medical student. After the panel, we challenge you and your peers from across the country to take the Lifestyle of Virtuous Excellence pledge that can also be found at our booth. The pledge involves 5 habits that you can implement into your life today, tomorrow, and the next day to become the holy and compassionate healthcare professional God is calling you to be.
Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Stanford. I'm a pediatrician in Denver, Colorado. 5 years ago, my profession and my faith set me down a path that I was not prepared to follow. Somehow, I was tasked with leading the opposition to physician-assisted suicide in my state. Not only was I tasked to testify myself, to find others to testify, to fundraise, and enter an arena that I was not very familiar with. I did not want to take this on, but I really felt God nudging me to. I remember telling him, I'm a pediatrician and I don't know very much about end of life, and I'm very busy. God gave me the courage and the strength to lead this effort. Not only that, Colorado was one of the first states to have this legislation presented. There was no playbook or organized effort. We had to create it. I was president of the local Catholic Medical Association at this time, and I knew I had to be the one to lead the efforts. For me personally, the most important part of my day has always been daily reflection and prayer. Fortunately, at this time, this was in place, and I was called to face this challenge. In order to illustrate to you how God directed me during this time, I will use Colossians 2, 6 through 7. Walk in Jesus Christ. Be rooted in him. Be built up in him. To be strengthened in faith, growing more and more in him through thanksgiving. I found I was rooted in him by creating a deep spiritual formation and immersing myself in the great counselor, our God. There are numerous ways to do this, including attending silent retreats, an Ignatian retreat. Consider getting a spiritual director to help guide you in the spiritual life, and continuing to study. Just like in medicine, we are lifelong learners. I built up my community in Him, a community of fellow Catholic medical professionals, family, priests, friends, and the saints to inspire me to become the best version of myself, to pray for and with me, and to seek counsel and wisdom from them. JP2 was my role model and intercessor during this time. He led World Youth Day in Colorado, my first year of medical school, and helped show me the beauty of suffering and mercy in how he lived his life and through his writings. My community that was built included many fellow Catholic Medical Association physicians, Christians, and Jewish physicians who testified with me and gave me tremendous support during these efforts. My family was also a tremendous gift as they made many sacrifices to allow me to give my time to this battle. Strengthened in faith. I focus on daily prayer. You must give Christ your time in daily prayer to receive His grace to guide your life and know His will and plan for you. Whatever time you can commit to praying, make sure to always stay faithful to it. All activity must be preceded by an intense life of prayer, contemplation, and seeking and listening to God's will. God cannot be outdone in generosity. For what you give to Him, He gives back. And lastly, you grow more and more through Him in thanksgiving. It is important to recognize the fruits of God's work in your life, for everything should end in thanksgiving. In order to face the challenges ahead of you in medicine, I encourage you to form a firm foundation of your faith by walking in Jesus Christ, building your community in Him, being strengthened in Him with daily prayer, and always giving thanks to Him for all the fruits that He has produced in your life. God bless you all, and good luck.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Scrafford. I'm an OBGYN practicing in my hometown of Wichita, Kansas. I think one of the biggest challenges that a Catholic physician can face, really any physician can face, is accompanying a patient and their family during unfathomable hardship and suffering. To go back to what Dr. McGovern was saying about empathic distress, there are many moments in medicine where one of our patients is faced with an extreme challenge or difficulty, sometimes even something that diagnostically or therapeutically we really can't overcome, at least in that moment. In my own field, one of the best examples of this is stillbirth, working with patients who on rare occasions have the loss of a child prior to delivery, sometimes even in the days or weeks leading up to their due date. This and another example being miscarriage share in common an extreme level of distress and suffering, that of losing a child. In my own field, I would say that this is the most challenging thing that I face. When I think about the ways that God has helped to prepare me for this aspect of my career in medicine, one of the first things that come to my mind is actually vocation. I know Dr. McGovern mentioned that we wouldn't be talking too much about personal vocation in this, and that it was more vocation of medicine. But I would argue that at least in my particular case, my personal vocation or call to the married life was one of the best ways that God prepared me for this and many other challenges in medicine. I got married during the graduation weekend of college and started having kids during med school. So I had the pleasure of being a husband and a father before I was ever a physician. And I think about what Dr. McGovern was saying about how when we become physicians, we enter into a covenant with our patients. And in my particular case, I would say that preparing for that vocation, entering that covenant of marriage with my wife, was one of the best ways that God prepared me for the challenges that would come up later in accompanying patients during extreme trials. In the midst of empathic distress in medicine, those moments where we're accompanying a patient who's truly suffering, one of the most difficult things for us to do is to become passive in some ways and to listen. It's one of the things that's least intuitive to us as physicians, especially after we gain a large amount of knowledge. But it's one of the things that's most important. In my own life, growing up with 6 kids in my family, especially being a middle child, I didn't have a whole lot of experience with that. I had to be active to survive. But as I got married, I realized the value in listening and being passive and simply accompanying someone as they're going through something. It's something that my vocation to marriage had really helped prepare me for by the time I became a physician, something that's also an ongoing process. In those moments in medicine where I work with a family, sometimes a complete stranger that I'm meeting them for the first time after they found out their baby has passed away, that ability to listen and be passive and simply accompany them on that journey, it has been extremely valuable to me. Now, not everyone is called to the married life, and depending on where you're at in your state in life, you may be called to marriage, but not there yet. I would still argue that process of pursuing your vocation is extremely valuable. Everyone in their discernment of vocation learns the process of listening, whether it's listening to a spouse, a future partner, or even God himself during the discernment process. I would encourage you, as you prepare on a journey towards medicine, to consider the value that your own vocation has, whether it's to the single, married, religious life. And no matter where you are in the process, I would consider the value that you can gain in focusing on that ability to passively listen and accompany someone.
Hi, my name is Anna Maria Dimitru. I am a resident in general surgery at the University of California in San Diego. I know that you've heard a lot during this breakout session about what it means to live a life of virtuous excellence, and I think there are a lot of challenges in healthcare today, especially for those of us who are practicing as Catholic physicians. I just wanted to share a little bit with you about my own journey and some of the experiences that I have faced. I think one of the biggest challenges, honestly, in the training program is that you don't always know what anything beyond the next step is. You know, school is challenging and it takes up a lot of your time, and in order to really do a good job with your studies, you often are faced with choices about how to spend the limited free time that you have outside of school. And I wanted to give you a specific example of a time during my training that I made a choice that maybe was crazy, but ended up having a huge impact on my life. I was actually studying for my boards for step 1 after the end of my second year, and I only had 4 weeks to study for it. During that time, I had this opportunity to go to a week-long seminar on medical ethics, and I was really interested. I really felt like that was something that I wasn't getting in my regular curriculum in medical school, and I really felt called to go, but also the timing was crazy because it was a week before my step exam, and I only had 4 weeks to study. So I really prayed about it, and I discerned, and I really felt like I was called to go to this seminar. So the day before that I was supposed to leave for the medical ethics seminar, I took a practice test, and it went terribly. It went really badly. So I kind of had a meltdown, and I wasn't really sure what to do, but then I took a step back and I said, okay, God, I really felt like you were calling me to this, so you're going to get me through this. And with that, I got on a plane, and I went to the seminar, and it really was one of the most impactful things I did in all of my medical training. It really changed the way that I practice medicine today, the way that I talk to patients and families, and to my colleagues about difficult issues. So it was one of the single best decisions that I made in my life. And you know what? The step exam worked out as well. It was kind of crazy, and I have to admit that I wasn't really sure going into the exam. I said, okay, God, I made these choices. I did what I could to study, and I really felt like you led me here, so get me through this. And I ended up doing well on step 1. I didn't get a crazy amazing score, but I got exactly enough to get me to the next step in my training program. So if there's one thing that you take away from me today, it's that you don't always have to see beyond the immediate next step. You just have to pray and trust and discern that you're walking forward together with God. And that reminds me of a quote that I just want to read to you today. One of the priests at the church that I went to during medical school read this actually on a New Year's Eve at Mass, or New Year's Day, sorry. And it really has stuck with me. It's a poem actually by an author called Minnie Louise Haskins, and the title is The Gate of the Year. It's also called God Knows. And I'll just read to you the first part. It says, "And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, 'Give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown.' And he replied, 'Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way.' So I went forth, and finding the hand of God, trod gladly into the night.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for saying yes to the Lord and being here with us today. My name is Paul, I'm currently a third-year medical student, and today I'm going to talk to you about how you can prepare right now so you can effectively share your faith with others as a medical student. I'm going to start by sharing with you a little bit of my own story. When I started college, my goal was to become rich and famous. I pursued pre-med because I was attracted to the prestige of becoming a doctor. At the time, I was doing great by worldly standards. I had lots of friends, was succeeding in all my classes, and succeeding in sports. But as time went on, I realized that despite all my worldly successes, my heart was restless and I felt completely empty inside. Funny enough, the Lord actually broke through to me at a focus conference. I didn't have much of a prayer life at the time, but I just remember coming before Him in adoration, and for the first time in my life, I humbled myself before Him and prayed, "Lord, I can't do this by myself. I need You." That's when my relationship with the Lord really began. From that time on, I made a commitment to spend at least 15 minutes just hanging out with Jesus every day at a local chapel. One day in prayer, I came across the story of the rich young man. You probably know the story. The rich young man comes to Jesus and asks what he must do to inherit eternal life, and Jesus tells him, "Go, sell all you have, give to the poor, and come follow me." And the rich man walks away because he has too much stuff and he's not willing to get rid of it to follow Jesus. I realized at that moment that I was the rich young man. I was holding on so tightly to my own plans that I never asked the Lord what He wanted of me and surrendered my life to Him. To make a long story short, I surrendered my plans to the Lord and He called me to follow Him in a radical way. I gave away all that I had and became a full-time Catholic missionary in India. The Lord had transformed my life from one of despair to one of great joy, and I knew that I was called to spend my life sharing His saving love with the world. After a few years living in the slums of India as a missionary, I realized that the Lord actually was calling me to medicine, but not for money, success, or prestige. Medicine was the vocation by which the Lord was calling me to become a saint. As a Catholic medical student, I knew that my primary goal must be to share His love with my classmates and all those He would place in my path. While trying to share my faith in medical school, I came across two big challenges. The first is time. Medical school is very demanding and it can be tough to find the time to nurture your own spiritual life, let alone share it with others. Number two, distractions. In the midst of medical training, I have found that it's all too easy to become less focused on the Lord and more focused on success, what others think, and planning for the perfect future. So how can you prepare to face these challenges? Prayer and priorities. These are the pillars you can start building in your life as a pre-medical student to prepare you to share your faith in medical school. Prayer. We must receive the Lord's love and prayer before we can share it. As Mother Teresa said, we can't give what we don't have. Priorities. I have learned that the Lord and other people always must come before medicine. Although I always study hard and strive for excellence, I have learned not to judge my success in medical school on whether or not I always have the right answers. At the end of my life, I know that I will not be judged on my transcript. I will be judged on how well I loved those around me. With that in mind, I have intentionally tried to prioritize ministry and relationships above all else during medical school. In doing so, I was able to help start a flourishing Catholic group and a homeless ministry on campus, as well as journey with a good friend of mine through RCIA. My greatest joy of medical school thus far was witnessing my friend get baptized this past Easter. I say this to illustrate a point. We make time for what we prioritize, and as Catholic medical students, our priorities must look different from those of the world. I want to leave you with one challenge that will change your life. Start spending 15 minutes a day alone with Jesus in prayer. I promise that through a habit of prayer, Jesus will purify your priorities, and you'll discover how He is calling you to spend your time. This will equip you not only to share your faith in medical school, but ultimately will help you become the saint you were created to be. Thank you and God bless.
Hello, pre-meds and pre-health students. It is such an honor to be speaking with you all today. My name is Kate Kondratuk and I am a dermatology resident in Pennsylvania. I'm originally from South Dakota, where I went to the University of South Dakota for medical school, and I am also the pre-medical subcommittee chair for the Catholic Medical Association. Today, I'm sharing my story on how the Lord formed me to say yes to Him in my medical vocation. First, I wanted to share with you guys a verse that has spoken to me time and time again in my medical training, and that is, "Delight in the Lord your God, and He will give you the desires of your heart." One of the first desires that I recognized on my heart as a child was the desire to be a doctor in the future. I have this distinct memory as a 3-year-old of playing with a toy stethoscope and trying to listen to my dad's heart. Oddly enough, it was never a question of, what is this tool? What is this thing I'm holding? How does it work? It was, I must learn to use this tool because I'm going to be a doctor in the future. So there was this very clear call from early on to medicine. Unfortunately, it took me a very long time to realize that within my little V vocational call, and this is the case for all of us, there's always the much larger and more important call to a relationship with the Lord. Now, as I was trying to live out this vocational call to medicine in my early college years, I didn't do it well. I was living for the glory of my own name. You guys are going to have to be honest with yourselves if this sounds familiar to anyone. But if you would have ran into me on campus at South Dakota State University when I was a sophomore in college, you would have found me running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to attend 17 credits of science classes, double majoring and double minoring, had 3 jobs, 7 extracurriculars on the side, and was working on honors classes and research grants to boot. On the outside, I was trying so hard to seem totally perfect and create an impeccable CV. On the inside, I felt like I had no sense of direction or meaning in my life, and I was totally miserable. Thankfully, God blessed me with several really good friends that recognized how much I was struggling and pushed me to grow in relationship with Him by starting spiritual direction. The first time I attended spiritual direction, I got some of the best advice of my life. I really hope and pray that some of you are already incorporating this practice into your lives. If not, you're in good company. I wasn't at this point of my training, but the chaplain at my college told me to start growing in personal prayer with the Lord. Set aside 15 minutes every single day, and before saying any words in prayer, asking Jesus to remind me how much He personally loves me, and not beginning to pray until I know that love. Now, a couple of things started happening in my life as a result of this practice. First, I grew in relationship with Christ. And as you grow in relationship with someone, you grow to recognize their movements and stirrings in your own life. I came to know that He only wanted what was best for me, and I grew in trust because of that. Secondly, you grow to know how much Christ loves you. I came to know that love so firmly that I can truly tell you guys that true love casts out fear. I was crippled by fear for a significant part of my first few semesters of college. Fear of imperfection, of being perceived as a failure by other people, as someone incapable of accomplishing what I felt called to, the vocation of medicine. It wasn't until I grew in knowledge of and security of how much the Lord loved me that I was able to say yes to Him and exactly what He was calling me. And you guys, it has been the most amazing adventure of my life since that time. I can tell you, I never would have had the confidence to say yes to the Lord and what He has called me to do. I've been able to travel to Africa by myself for over a month, living at a convent with some sisters and having a global health experience in a rural hospital in Zambia. I've been able to work for the Catholic Medical Association as their National Student Section President. These are things I never would have been able to do without the Lord. So I just want to tell you guys that, one, if you're not already spending time in prayer, start with 15 minutes a day. Set a timer. Learn to discern His voice in your life. Learn to say yes to Him. He'll begin with small asks, but the requests will grow over time. He's very intentional in how He trains us. He does it oh so gently and oh so well. And finally, trust that He is leading you to fulfillment of the desires of your heart. This is the greatest adventure that you will ever embark upon. Have joy, take courage, and begin. In the words of Mother Teresa, yesterday is gone, tomorrow is not yet come. We have only today. Let us begin. God bless you guys.
If you haven't done so already, please head over now to the CMA booth in Mission Way, where you will find a link to our live Zoom discussion with our panelists, featuring answers to the questions you submitted during our breakout session.